all these other things, you can transform the economy, you can do many other infrastructural development, but a country can come tumbling down once because of security issues, and I think we have not reached there. And finally, the issue of land ownership. I believe, Chair, if this committee will have, in its wisdom, decided to recommend legal reforms, whether through standalone statutes or through statute law amendment bill, in line of what the distinguished Senator for Baringo has suggested, which I support, owners of land must be visited with vicarious liability. It is an old principle. For the lawyers in the House, the rule in Raylers versus Fletcher must apply to owners of land. You are an owner of some bush, some land somewhere. It is your responsibility to make sure, because it's private property, and you know they are, because again of freedoms, even security agencies are limited in what they can do in your space, in your house. They must have a reasonable reason. They must even get a search warrant sometimes because of the right to privacy. So this is your private land. We will not violate it, but you must also take responsibility for what is happening there. It cannot be a hideout for dangerous criminals, and then you come telling us this is your private space. It is your private so long as the law and order is established and could even come through the penal code, but also through even the land laws. There's nothing wrong with the land laws, even having a bit of responsibility, even visiting liability on land owners, because it's a huge problem. I agree with Senator Steptumo, and perhaps that is something the committee should consider as part of the legal reforms for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Eddie wants to take the floor, but as he takes the floor, I am feeling the way your presentation is on the office of the ODPP. So as you're answering Senator Eddie's, you probably want to tell us, initially, as you and me know, and all the lawyers, all prosecutions and prosecutorial power was vested in the office of the Attorney General. It may be for good reason that they were also briefed in other things like national security. In this one, I feel the mood of the presentation was that there was a bungling in terms of the application of the law in the office of the ODPP. So I wanted you, as you're answering Senator here, to tell us, would you be comfortable, or is it your recommendation that we should have a return to prosecutions on issues only regarding public security, mass public security, be returned back to the Attorney General? Is that your thinking? Would it be a better way to work, and then we leave the ODPP with the normal prosecutions, but when it comes to huge public security issues, that prosecutorial power should go back to the Attorney General as it was in the olden times? Just think about it as Senator Eddie puts his question.
Thank you, Chair. And also thank you, CS, for a very elaborate presentation. Let me take this opportunity also as a member of this committee, having visited Shakahola with the team under the leadership of our chair. And I must say that in the circumstances we find ourselves in as a nation, I must commend you for the job you continue to do. It is indeed commendable given the circumstances and the nuances that you find yourself in. I just wanted to interrogate just 3 quick thoughts in the presentation that you've given us here, just to help us when we'll be at some point in the course of this exercise that we have been given by the Senate, we'll be trying to do our reports. Perhaps you could help us understand these 3 thoughts. And the thoughts are expressly so indicated in point number 3, point number 5, and point number 6. So I'll start with point number 3. The quest that we had here was the reasons it took too long for security agencies to act on the complaints raised by locals. Perhaps the thought that I want to interrogate here, CS, whether in our current security infrastructure or going forward, I like the word that you use, that we have lost the present but we must now save the future. What is the status of our disaster readiness and preparedness with regards to this nature of crimes? Because I don't think that the issue raised by any persons who find themselves in this situation, whether locals or alarms from other different quarters, the response should be limited to just arrest and prosecution. That can sometimes take long. Sometimes it defines why we have had such a long time even saving people who we could have saved if we had a proper strategy in terms of readiness and preparedness in terms of response. So that's something I would want to know with regards to this, given and put into mind that you're still trying to save some people who have ran from where they were initially going deeper into deeper forests. So that would be 1. Number 2 will be on point 5. We had a quest here on the proposals for preventing religious organizations from engaging in extreme indoctrination of their followers, including radicalization and spiritual and financial exploitation. And your response, or rather your guidance, has been very much church-centric, if I may use that word, for lack of a better word. I see your proposals here are very much church-centric, how we should have churches, perhaps evangelistics, being in fellowships, individual ownership of churches should be banned throughout the country. All other churches must be required to veil their doctrines, etc., etc. Is this an assessment that other religious organizations are not at risk? And would we be out of your recommendation if perhaps we could modify these recommendations to read religious readers? Because it would be my view that the same extremism, whether the danger is with us now or could potentially be in the future, could just as well be found in other religious organizations or religious societies. That includes Muslims, includes Baha'i faith, includes Hindus, includes pagans. Like, there are many of them, that some of them have got these also extremist doctrines that perhaps might not have led us to this kind of security situation, but in your spirit of saving the future, would it be okay for this committee to take your responses here in context of larger religious organizations in the society? And lastly, CS, we had a question here on proposal regarding a regulatory framework to govern religious organizations. And your response was that perhaps the Presidential Task Force on the review of the of the legal and regulatory framework governing religious organizations would perhaps be best placed to give us an insight in this. Indeed, I don't dispute that, but it's my view that perhaps this particular body will be able to contribute, but not be able to give us the what I'll call holistic view with regards to this framework. And I think that perhaps I wanted to interrogate this further in the context of what I would call in law deterrence, because your proposals have been mostly towards prevention. And I know that prevention and deterrence seem to be close, but on a legal framework basis, they're actually separate. So I'll give you, for instance, if you have put in place a number of precautionary strategies to make sure that we cannot face this kind of problems again. For instance, what you're proposed here, like having religious organizations, having doctrines and registered with the Register of Society, or even having relevant certificates, that would be amazing prevention mechanisms. But deterrent could perhaps go to what the chair was asking. What, for instance, should be the commensurate punishment to somebody like Mackenzie, who, if found liable, what could be the commensurate punishment that if anybody else was to see that this is the punishment this person has gotten for doing this kind of behavior legally, then they will be deterred, prevention mechanisms notwithstanding. I would want to see your ideas on that. Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, CS.
CS, there's a request that you take at least one round of questions. So just take notes.
Can I request? I'll try to be brief. I would rather answer one after the other, so that the danger is that if there are too many, something will get
lost. Okay, then take those. Take those.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for accommodating me. Chair and members, the logic of removing the powers of the public prosecutor from the Attorney General of the Republic is a logic which is justifiable and which is based on international best practice in many jurisdictions of the world. It will be a clawback of our democracy to again return the powers of the public prosecutor to the Attorney General of the Republic, in my humble view. This is why. The Attorney General is the chief legal advisor of government, period. The work of the Attorney General is to advise government agencies so that they conduct their activities within the law. The public prosecutor has a unique role of ensuring that the criminal justice is realized in the country. Is a completely different role. It will be a clawback on our democracy to try and lump the powers of the chief legal government advisor with those of the public prosecutor together. First of all, it's not neat. Already, even whatever is left of the Attorney General, that mandate is overwhelming on the state law office. You can imagine the number of legal advisories by everyone in every ministry, department, agency across the Kenya on a daily basis. They are doing a contract here, a tender here, an administrative issue here. It's overwhelming. We've just passed in cabinet recently, I think it will come before the Houses of Parliament, a position on decentralization of the office of the Attorney General. They can't deliver. Sometimes we blame institutions, yet the capacity has been held back. So in a nutshell, it will be wrong doctrine to claw back on the advancement of the 2010 Constitution of separating the chief legal advisor's office, who is the Attorney General, with the prosecutor. Initially they were together. So already even what is left is overwhelming. The solution is again, other than the usual issues about capacity and more personnel and more resources, which is the song of every ministry, every department across government, not just in Kenya, in all countries. And I'm not underestimating the role of resources and capacity in delivery of services. But this is my view. If I were the public prosecutor of Kenya, if I were the Attorney General of Kenya, let's give those two examples because they are the ones which have been raised on the floor here. There are certain matters, because of their gravity, those matters, with or without capacity and resources and all the other things that are lacking, that must be handled seriously, carefully, and at the highest level. I'll give you an example. Why we've been losing so many cases is because you have matters like this, of this type, the Mackenzie type of matters. And you'll see, and I have nothing against the younger advocates and the younger, some of the young advocates are very good people, including prosecutors. But there are some things that cannot be processed in any other way. You're a legal professional, and you know the meaning of seniority in the legal profession, even in terms of persuasion of the judiciary. You know what it means. And there are some things which you cannot cover them up. The reason why we have senior counsel in the bar is because they hold a certain card that only a senior counsel holds that card. The judge is forced to be patient, and even when the judge is uncomfortable, to be respectful. The senior counsel, to make their cases, they can even address the court for hours, which a young advocate who was admitted last night will even be dismissed before they greet the judge, especially if the judge has woken up with, maybe they are stressed, and they are also human beings. And there are things which only senior counsel, even within the senior counsel, there is the order of seniority. There are some lawyers who will get away with anything. I remember during my practice days, there is one of our colleagues who passed on, the oldest advocate at that time. And he would come to court late, 30 minutes late, and sit down. Of course, the other matters will be put aside and his matter will be called. And he wakes up and says, "Oh, Judge, I'm sorry, I'm late because I was attending my wife's birthday." And because the judge is the grand student of this fellow, there is nothing he can do. What am I saying with regard to ODPP? Chair, I believe matters like this must be prosecuted by the Director of Public Prosecution in person. Matters which I would expect that the Attorney General of the Republic must prosecute them in person, because they are lawyers. That way, of optics, the country and the justice system, even the judiciary, which is dispensing justice, is aware this is how seriously we are taking this matter. You send a young lawyer to handle a complex matter of monumental implications on our justice and security system. Some young lawyers there, this is their. How do you expect to win that case? So the improvement must be within the existing institution. The ODPP is the right structure, is the right institution. But I'm afraid, even as much as there are legitimate grievances on how we could improve service delivery, I am not persuaded at the moment as a country, and I'm not blaming any particular state official. We are not taking matters seriously. This country, Chair, has this, unfortunately, people in high positions enjoying the privileges of office and not taking up the responsibilities of that office. And it's across board. There are so many big men and women in this country. And they are so big, some matters, they think all those are small matters. They will only appear when it's necessary. I would argue, and I don't know whether that should be part of the prosecution policy of the country. I hope once we review the prosecution policy of the country, it will pass through the Houses of Parliament and it will be debated. Certain matters must be handled directly and personally by the Director of Public Prosecutions in person. There's seniority, there's clout, there's experience, there's leverage, so you will not lose them. But returning matters to the AG will even complicate the matter because it's already swamped with a lot of work in giving routine advisory to government and also the civil litigation side. Then Senator Okech asked about our preparedness. I think our problem is not about preparedness. Our problem is elsewhere. It's about the efficacy of our institutions across the board. And the problem is, again, our lack of adequate institutional patriotism to know that every institution plays a part in our society, in our democracy, and they must deliver. There is a bit of a gap in that area, and I could try to read the mind of the distinguished senator from Migori. And we are working on them, especially the equipment for search and rescue. And we have already made progress. And the challenge has not been with equipment. And I believe more or less we have exhausted all the people that would have saved at the moment, unless there are rare cases. We've been able to complete that process, unless there are rare cases which might emerge. The slow nature of the recovery of bodies is what I explained. It's a scientific process. It's governed by international protocols. And the way criminals of this nature operate, because it is organized crime, they don't just bury people. Part of the work is to conceal the graves. So we are not just looking for places where looks like it was dug up. No. We are looking everywhere. What we've done in the last 2 weeks, we have opened security roads. Every 100 acres has a security road around it. Out of the 800 acres, 100 acres is a security road around it. So that we can now do the search for graves and identification of graves meter by meter, centimeter by centimeter, millimeter by millimeter. And it's a very, very slow process. Some of the graves, this crook had grown some crops on top of the graves. So you find some kunde, some vegetables growing on a mass grave, just to cover up. Others, there are structures that looks like a house, inside is a grave. Others in very unlikely places. So that will take a bit of time. Deterrence, I agree with Senator Okech. It's one thing to bring the crimes, the elements of the crime, but this must be connected with the procedural tightening of the process. To once you're suspected of certain crime, the procedure is different. And then now we strengthen our institutions so that that process is not abused. That's how other countries have made some progress in this area have done. We make it impossible for the procedure to be abused, so that if you disagree with somebody, either because of politics or whatever differences, you go and put them on a track for suspicion of terrorism, so that they are kept. I also agree with the distinguished senator. Yes, this mandate is about Shakahola, but I've seen your terms of reference, Chair, also include general terrain, the general terrain of radicalization, indoctrination by religious groups. So if I've seen your mandate, I think it's general. What has not come out, and I agree with the senator from Migori, is that we must now remove ourselves at some point from the specific suspect and look at this issue as one space called the religious space, and where all these things operate. And I've been very careful all the time to say churches, mosques, temples, houses of worship of whatever nature, including people who worship elsewhere, and those who do not believe in God, because there are those who say they are atheists, but I believe that the lack of faith is that you don't believe in God. That is a faith. So they should be cornered there also, because they cannot say, oh, as we are not Christians, but they lack faith in God. So they believe there is no God. So that is our faith. So nobody should be left out. Satan or others who worship whatever they worship, the ancestors, others don't worship anything, they don't worshiping anything. So, Mr. Chairman, nobody, I repeat, nobody should escape your dragnet. You must catch everybody, as suggested by our brother, the senator from Migori. Chair, and just one small item there, that there's a reason why there's too much church-related attention, because of this particular incident that caused all this inquiry and a particular preacher of the Christian faith. We should not be so obsessed with only that incident and forget that faith. That a few years ago, we had a similar upsurge of serious crimes globally, perpetuated by perverts of the Islamic faith. Some of it is still ongoing. This country has suffered a lot. Many countries in the world have suffered a lot by people who are causing mayhem and death, hiding under this. Measures we took in the early 2013, especially the Security Laws Amendment Act of 2014, which, controversial as it was, by the way, is what has sustained this country. Act, that those miscellaneous amendment laws. Now, so my view is that this incident that new addition to the existing framework. Otherwise, the framework is there, and you can excuse why the focus now is on the Christian faith, because the perpetrator of the triggering no inquiry is of the Christian faith. Lastly, why no, I was not trying to inhibit anything. In any case, lawmaking is a function of parliament. But you know, I'm a member of the executive. What the executive is or hopes will tackle, and because there is already a task force, executive initiated task force led by, which was appointed by the president. Because now there is an executive initiated process until it brings its recommendations, processes them through the appointing authority, and then now we can present them for incorporation into. And the role of legislation is entirely with the Houses of Parliament. Thank you.
So, one question from Senator Vice Chair and Senator Okoli and Senator Hamida, in that order.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, CS. You have really come out very strongly. And say on the issue of the discovery of the two bodies for the miners. When we were previously, when we visited, we were informed that those two miners, the discovery, there was a report. We were informed that the grandfather who went to report two miners, so after he reported and repeatedly efforts to report to the police to get assistance, there was no help. So he got the help from the NGO to go and help him to get the bodies of those two miners. And after that, which was 20th, 22nd, Mackenzie was taken to court. Yeah? And then in April 19th, that is a period of 1 month, that Okoa Maisha thing came in. How did it take 1 month for the Okoa Maisha to come in after the discovery of the two miners and the bodies which were discovered by the headers? Yeah? And even after the reports to the police, but still there was no answer or any help from the police. I know you have come out very strongly to blame the judiciary, which I would agree with you 100%, Chair, and I would agree that we need to interrogate these judiciaries who are here, who were involved in these Mackenzie issues. And I really want to tell you that when I see it, Mackenzie could not have done all he did as a person, individual himself. He had a very big network. And that is what you need to get to the bottom of, because what matters and what is important is the evidence. You have realized how the judiciary has been behaving. And most likely it is because of lack of very strong evidence. And when if we don't tackle this issue, which you have said, there are still other issues existing in our country on the same nature, then we will never get anywhere. As you talk that we have lost the present, we will still be losing the future. And also, you said that, you came strongly to say that there is a legal document between Mackenzie and the people down there on the ground. That document, I don't think it's legal, and that is the document which will be thrown out by the judges if you think that is the document which will help us in court. Because judges would say this is not a legal binding document, we need the legal binding documents, which is the title deed and the owners. And Mackenzie, what I see, he might even be free, because he has come out to say that land is not his. And true to his word, yes, the land is. So, unless you have very strong evidence, and that is why we insisted on investigating those officers who were on, because I would rather they were suspended or they were actually taken in for investigation to start immediately rather than. How free is freedom? Because you really insisted that freedom is enshrined in our constitution, which is very true, freedom of worship. And here you came up with your proposal that individual ownership of churches should be banned throughout the country. Is that freedom? So I think we need to really see how best we can handle this thing, because when we talk of freedom, freedom with no limit, it can cause damage to the country, and it has done already. So, when I see us, I really thank you so much, but those are my few remarks. Thank you.
Senator Wakoli.
Thank you, Chair. My question was directed to Waziri. We've had interactions with the non-governmental organizations that have been involved in this operation. And their perspective is that the police is well funded to do this operation, unlike other departments like the pathologists, prisons department, children's department are well funded, the child care rehabilitation centers, as well as prisons where suspects have been kept. Food and housing is a problem. Would like to know how is the funding taking place in these categories of teams supporting in this operation in Shakahola. Number two is with the aspect that you've just talked about. We interacted with Muslims, the Hindus, and there is a notion that there has been a skewed approach in dealing with this radicalization matter. There is a belief that we are soft, high-handedness, stiff-neckedness that the other Muslim community has to ensure that the praying ground. And finally, to pick up from what my good sister said, information in our files indicate that there was a militia that worked with Mackenzie, that under prior media reports that some people had on their skulls or bodies, there are blunt objects that could have been used. So does it assure or justify that Mackenzie militia that he used to, protect his operation, conceal the evidence, and therefore as he speaks or he operates today, he is innocent?
Senator Hamida.
Thank you, Chair. I hope CS can take one more. It really seems that Pastor had 9 lives, or he still has 9 lives. I mean, according to what you have narrated all this time, he has escaped the jail. What I'm getting is I feel so relieved that I'm getting the assurance from you, Bwana CS, that this matter will come, actually justice shall prevail, and will hold you responsible for that. Seriously, you can imagine the pain of all the families
that are going through now, exhuming the bodies of their loved ones. It's really, really painful, and I'm just wondering what kind of pain is Pastor was actually leased for about 45 years, since 1984, and ending 2029. That's 6 years to go. The land was leased for IDPs, and now, like I said, I wanted you to to narrate, to tell us about the land, because now I was trying to get the connections. But then when we asked for any evidence of the IDPs that were settled, none. There's no evidence of any IDPs. So the land was idle, actually. And for me, looking at it yesterday, it was more or less the conveyor belt of all evil, because the government wasn't there, the security didn't have, no intelligence for the Shakahola Chakama ranch, and that ranch was actually, it was a ranch, and the government paid 100 million for the land, actually, to be leased for the IDPs, and nothing was done. So just wondering, what is the taxpayer? Why would even the government, do such a thing? But then there's no accountability for that. On a CS, and there was no kind of real settlement, for Kenyans. Nothing, zero. So this, apart from Mackenzie, I'm still wondering also, were there other people who did the same? Are these bodies being exhumed? Are they just for Mackenzie or other, other evil? So anybody would have played, it was a field. You have your own, issues. Memalizana na mtu, maybe that was the place. So for actually Mackenzie to have settled at that place and comfortably doing what he could do, yes, the ranch is open. Any kind of evil would have taken place. So as much as, yes, Mackenzie has issues, what about the other people? And of course we blame the government for this. What other evils did went on in Chakama Ranch? I'm also hoping that the mental health for since I have a motion on mental health for police officers, at least should take place. Just one more, when I see is that at what point does the security agency get concerned about the activities of a certain church or religious outfit? For example, we went to Kisumu and we actually forced ourselves to Father John Pessers. And I remember we had the vice chair, and she was actually found about 7 cases of people who have been locked in with chains and lock and chain. You can imagine. So all these things are still going on, and unfortunately we didn't have time. We were actually told that there were graves inside, and he actually agreed that there were graves. Things, unfortunately, we didn't have time that day and Father Pesa, he pretended to be quite was innocent, but then the next day, on interview, he was quite harsh on us. But then we found we actually released about 7 to 9 people who are locked in and who are of, intent. So I'm just wondering at what time the Nigerians, yesterday we had, I think, civil society coming with their human rights, young people saying they are Nigerian, yes, who are holding, the same kind of cult, and it's going on in Kenya. But they even them, they are scared because of the spirit or something. So even the human rights, imagine that. So I'm just wondering, where are we heading, and at what point is the security coming in, Bwana CS? But at least we are getting that assurance from you, and I still commend you, Bwana CS. What you've been doing, actually, you've been there throughout, you know, with the Chakama, and as much new graves, you can imagine digging in new graves over and over again, and you're telling us you're going to a new site. It's true. 1 or 2 people is 150 Bwana CS. And imagine Kenyans are taking it as per norm. You know, it's normal. Oh, leo wametoa 300. Oh, leo wametoa 20. Ah, the other 30. Imagine the families that, you know, are left behind. But we are 350. Hell knows we could be at 600. What is the government going to do about it? The judiciary, seriously, they must answer to this. This is painful to Kenyans. This is, you know, it is a grave matter. It is indeed a grave matter. Wacha ile tunasema guys, you know, would have identified, but then Chakama Ranch, and we have if we have any other ranches, Bwana CS, going through the same kind of evils, this must stop. Asante.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Bwana CS, for the presentation. My concern is that Mackenzie went under the radar after